Since Dad will be gone soon, I'll just endure it for a while longer. You are terrible, Greg, aren't you? Although, lately I may have been viewing him solely in terms of financial worth. A discomforting conversation between a brother and his wife. I happened to overhear this conversation, and my father's face looked sadder than ever, causing me unbearable pain. As I stood next to my dad, unable to remain silent, I reached for the doorknob to interrupt, but he grabbed my hand and shook his head. Don't worry. There's just one thing I need help with. The unexpected measure he was considering against my brother and his wife was, I am Susan Owen. At 58, I work at a local osteopathic clinic, handling reception and miscellaneous duties. I am the same age as my husband, Robert, and we have a 28-year-old daughter. We married at 25, and after struggling to conceive, our daughter was born when I was 30 following fertility treatments. She recently decided to marry and moved out of the house. While I sometimes feel lonely, having been used to living with 3 people, I am happy about my daughter's marriage. I have always wanted to avoid conflicts and live peacefully, but specific individuals were threatening that desire. My brother Greg has a completely opposite personality, aggressive, and I've disliked his mischief since childhood. As a child, he destroyed a plush toy I was attached to and deliberately attached insects I disliked to me. Particularly memorable was when he released a cherished goldfish I got into a river. I remember crying a lot then, and I still haven't forgotten it. As Greg became an adult and started living alone, our interactions significantly decreased, and I was relieved internally. I had hoped to keep contact with him to a minimum, but surprisingly, Robert and Greg were working at the same company. When Robert got the job, I knew he was at the same company as Greg, but since they were in different departments, I intentionally did not tell Robert, as I tried to minimize my involvement with Greg. Robert, like me, was a pacifist and disliked conflicts. His gentle nature was greatly appreciated by my parents. We had been dating since college, considering marriage from the start, and had already met both families. As Robert took on a significant project at work, succeeded, and was smoothly promoted, our life stabilized, and we decided to marry. Around that time, Greg brought the woman he wanted to marry, Kate, who became a factor in disturbing my peaceful life. One day, while we were relaxing on the couch at home, the doorbell rang. I'm back, and I've brought her with me. That moment was my first encounter with Kate, and her personality was vastly different from mine, similar to my brother's. Kate, a classmate of Greg's, was 2 years older than me, had light brown hair and flashy makeup that spoke of her restlessness. Although one shouldn't judge based on appearance alone, the moment I saw her, I couldn't help but feel that our worldviews were different. Nice to meet you, I'm Greg's sister, Susan. Hope we'll get along. In response to my greeting, Kate looked me up and down coldly and said, "Oh, you're Susan. It's troublesome that we're getting married at the same time." Well, can't be helped. Looking forward to it. I felt slightly uncomfortable with her way of speaking. We had been planning our marriage for a long time, and although I had already discussed it with our parents, being spoken to in such a manner was irritating, but I kept my emotions hidden since it was our first meeting. That's right, Kate, right? I'd be happy if you're kind to our daughter. Let's all get along and live peacefully. My father, a well-regarded pediatrician in this area for many years, immediately followed up. Always smiling, gentle, and warm-hearted, I have yet to meet someone who dislikes my father. I wanted a stable life because I grew up watching my parents. While I resisted a tumultuous life like something out of a TV drama, meeting Kate gave me a bad feeling. After our marriage, Greg and I were living peacefully, but a sudden incident changed everything. It was Robert's promotion. Greg was older and had been at the company longer than Robert, but Robert was promoted and became Greg's direct supervisor. This company didn't follow the typical seniority system, it adopted a meritocracy. Robert's work was very meticulous, and he responded precisely where needed. From his capabilities, he was deeply trusted and valued by both upper management and colleagues. His promotion was decided without a single objection, following the success of a major project he undertook before our marriage. An old colleague of mine who works at the same place occasionally gives me inside information. When my father invited us home to celebrate Robert's promotion, he didn't inform Greg, considering his feelings, but Greg saw our car and came to our home because he lived nearby. "What are you doing, Dad?" Excluding us and preparing a luxurious meal. "Do you prioritize your son-in-law over your own son?" They really were. It's unforgivable how they're treating you, Greg, so poorly when you're already down about not getting a promotion. The two vented their illogical anger. The celebration was supposed to start in a cheerful atmosphere, but it was ruined by this sudden event. It's not like that. Greg is important too, but Robert is already my son. It's natural to celebrate good news. If you're upset, I apologize. So my innocent father apologized. Dad, don't apologize. Greg, my promotion is also thanks to everyone's support. How about we skip the celebration tonight and just enjoy the delicious food? When Robert suggested this, the two reluctantly sat down and enjoyed the meal together. After dinner, while relaxing in the living room, we told my father about our fertility treatment. I see, actually, we were also blessed with you and Greg through fertility treatment. I was astonished by this new fact. Really? I had no idea. Was the process difficult? It was tough for Mom. There wasn't much I could do. What are you talking about? It was because of Dad's cooperation that we could have children. This affectionate exchange was comforting. Knowing there were successful examples of fertility treatment around us motivated us to keep trying. However, Greg and Kate, who were upstairs, came down and interrupted with a disdainful tone, "What, Susan is receiving fertility treatment?" Afterward, Kate whispered something to Greg. "Actually, I was going to wait until the second trimester, but I'm actually pregnant." The sudden confession of pregnancy started. Everyone seemed unable to hide their surprise. "Ah, is that so? That is truly something to celebrate." Really. I was shocked by the sudden announcement, but please take care of your health. Congratulations on your pregnancy. I expressed my joy from the heart. However, Kate's face looked displeased, as if she was not convinced. Knowing that I was undergoing fertility treatment, she might have intentionally announced her pregnancy at this timing. Despite Kate's announcement, I was not shocked, rather. I sincerely congratulated her on her pregnancy. Later, Greg and Kate had a daughter, and we continued our efforts with fertility treatments. After 3 years of treatment, we finally had a daughter. It was the last in vitro fertilization attempt after deciding to live just the two of us, and our daughter joined our family. During the treatment, Robert suggested me to quit my job due to the commuting and emotional burdens, so I stayed at home as a housewife. Thus, I avoided conversations with Kate that could contain sarcasm and minimized contact with her as much as possible. However, with the birth of our daughter, my feelings changed, and visits to my parents' home began to increase again. "Hey Susan, your child has such small eyes that it's a bit pitiful." "Oh, but both of you have small eyes too, right?" The first comment she made upon meeting my daughter was characteristically inconsiderate. At that moment, I strongly felt again that I wanted to avoid any relationship with this person. Kate always wanted to make herself look good. "Don't worry about it. Don't worry. I'm not bothered." Thanks to my mother's consoling after Kate's sarcastic remarks, I managed to maintain a calm demeanor. "Mother, can I take this rice home?" "Oh, I just bought new rice." "Don't be so stingy. We're out of rice at home, haha." Before my mother could agree, Kate had already taken the bag of rice and left the house. According to my troubled mother, she visits several times a week and takes away groceries and daily necessities without permission. I was only surprised by Kate's unreasonable behavior. Amidst these daily events, I received news from my mother that my father had suddenly collapsed. He was still active as a doctor, working hard every day for his patients. Considering his age, I went to the hospital to suggest retirement, but when I arrived, he was as energetic as ever. I was momentarily confused but quickly relieved. However, before I could relax, my mother started talking. "Susan, actually, your father has cancer." "What? Cancer?" "He just got brought in? How can you know that so soon?" "We've actually been hiding it. He's had cancer for a while." I was speechless at this shocking revelation. "Dad, did you know about the cancer?" "As a doctor, yes. But by the time I noticed, it was too late. I probably have around 3 months left." Normally cheerful and optimistic, my father was slightly infuriating that day. "Dad, why didn't you tell us sooner?" I said that while tearing up. "I wanted to minimize the time you all would be sad." "I'm really sorry." My father seemed regretful and apologized. "I want to spend my final days at home. It might be a bother, but is that okay?" "Of course." "I want to be with you too, Dad. I'll discuss it with Robert and come back home." Thus, I decided to spend some time at my parents' home, spending time by their side. My daughter, living 2 hours away by train, visited several times to see my father, which greatly pleased him. Robert, amidst his busy work schedule, helped greatly by shopping and keeping my father company. I shared this situation with Greg and Kate, but after previously visiting often, they completely stopped showing up. A few days later, my father invited both our family and Greg's family to the house. "I'm sorry, but there's something about the inheritance I need to discuss." As my father said that, Greg and Kate's eyes lit up. "In fact, my assets are about $5 million. Everyone, except for my mother, was shocked by the unexpected amount. Further inquiry revealed that in addition to his income as a doctor, my father had built up a considerable amount through stock investments. "I want to carefully consider this matter until my time comes and make a final decision. I'd appreciate your cooperation." "Of course, Dad." Greg, who hadn't even shown his face during the visits, responded, and I could barely contain my anger. "Father, aren't you in pain? Maybe you should lie down for a bit." Kate began to ingratiate herself, using the situation. Afterward, the couple visited my father daily, changing sheets and replenishing medicines, and acted devotedly. While feeling uncomfortable with their changed attitude, I remained silent as my father was pleased. One day, as my parents and I returned from the hospital, someone was in the living room. Looking at the shoes, they belonged to Greg and Kate. Without paying much attention, I headed to the living room with my father and overheard my brother and his wife's conversation. $5 million is incredible. Dad will be gone soon, so let's just endure it for a while longer. You are terrible, Greg, aren't you? Although, lately I may have been viewing him solely in terms of financial worth. But I heard he only had 3 months left, and he still seems healthy. I wonder how long we'll need to care for him. My brother and his wife were having a discomforting conversation. Seeing my father's sad face next to me caused me pain. Unable to remain silent upon seeing my father like this, I was about to head to the living room when he grabbed my hand and shook his head. "Don't worry. There's just one thing I need help with." My father said that. The next day, Greg and Kate came to visit my father again and started various caregiving tasks. "You both must be busy, there's no need to come anymore." "But Dad, considering all that you've done for us, we want to repay you." Even though they may seem like a family on the surface, Greg was only thinking about money. Father's face was clearly lonely. "I really was given 3 months to live, but it's been 4 months now. You must be eager for the inheritance." Greg and Kate seemed surprised by those words. "Oh, Father, that's not true at all. If possible, we want you to live longer." Kate quickly countered. "Maybe, were you eavesdropping on our conversation yesterday?" "What conversation? Were you saying something bad?" From a lonely expression, Father laughed as if to tease. Watching them, the way the two became active and hurried was indescribably interesting. On the following day, Robert left work early to join us for dinner at our house. "Hello. Father, I brought some delicious-looking grapes. Let's chill and enjoy them later." "Oh, what magnificent fruits, can't wait to eat them." "Thanks." Father seemed very pleased with Robert's visit. Robert quickly helped prepare the dinner, and we all sat down at the table. Then, Robert broached the subject. "I heard that Greg quit his job. Did you hear anything?" We were surprised by his question and couldn't answer. It seems like it was more like he was fired, more than him quitting on his own. Really? What happened? It became clear that Greg's work performance had been deteriorating, and he had been frequently reprimanded. Moreover, recently his behavior worsened, and after angering a client, he had a big argument with his direct supervisor, which ultimately led him to resign. That recently is actually after I mentioned the inheritance. That timing might match up. Yes, it's a shame he caused trouble for the company and Robert as well. Father apologized. That child used to be such a good boy, but somehow he changed. Father's face has been filled with sadness recently, and it's been very hard to see. Sorry to bring this up. The delicious food will get cold. Robert, really thank you. We are so happy you joined our family. At those words, Robert nodded with a smile. All right, I've made up my mind. I need everyone's cooperation. With that declaration, Father stood up, leaning on his cane, and handed over something. When we saw the contents of the envelope, we were surprised by Father's explanation, but we agreed to the plan and promised to cooperate. 2 weeks later, Father passed away, watched over by Mother, me, and Robert. We couldn't get in touch with Greg and Kate, and they were absent during that crucial moment. Father's death brought deep sadness, but we were grateful to have spent his last days together. Father had posted the funeral notice at the hospital where he worked. On the day of the funeral, many people whom Father had cared for gathered. We realized how much Father was loved by many people. After settling down post-funeral, the topic of the inheritance came up. Right after Father's death, Greg immediately brought up the topic of the estate. Greg, Father just passed away, and you're talking about this? Everyone grieves differently, but it's hard for me, having lost my husband. But we need to hurry with the estate matters. I was disappointed by Kate's lack of understanding of my mother's feelings. If only they would just keep quiet, really terrible people. After living so long, they haven't learned anything. It was rare for Robert to raise his voice in anger. They were surprised by his reaction. Neither of you deserves to receive his inheritance. Greg retorted with a flushed face. What? You earn a high salary, you don't need the inheritance. Calm down, Greg, we have a trip to Hawaii next week. For now, let's just split the $5 million inheritance. With that, Kate, looking angry, took Greg and went home. I can't believe those two, planning a trip to Hawaii at a time like this. It's rare for Robert to get so angry. Thank you. I'm embarrassed at my son, but I regret how I raised him. Even at this age, I'm saddened that I have to cause my mother distress. But don't worry. Those two will have hell to come. Before they left for Hawaii, they handed over their bank details to us, instructing us to transfer the inheritance there. A few days later, while my mother and I were clearing up Father's belongings, they returned. Hawaii was really wonderful. Here, a souvenir for you. They handed over a can of macadamia nuts. Accepting the souvenir, I felt it was better than nothing. How's the inheritance? We'd like our bank card back, they demanded. I handed them the bank card. I can't see the money in the account. What do you mean? It hasn't increased since we withdrew money before the trip, they protested. Haven't you divided the inheritance yet, they asked. It's divided. Look properly. There should be $1,000 in each of your accounts, I replied. Hey Mom, what's this about $1,000? They reacted mockingly, but my mother and I remained calm. This date, it's from before Father passed, isn't it? They pointed out. That's right. The distribution of the inheritance is already complete, I explained. As they looked surprised, I showed them Father's will. In the will, The majority of the estate was left to my mother and me, $500,000 each. Greg received only $1,000, and the rest was donated to pediatric medicine. What is this? This isn't what we agreed. Greg exploded in anger. Hey brother, did father ever ask you to sign any special documents? Yes, I did sign. Dad said he was leaving me $5 million. Really? Did you actually check what that document was about? It's just like you, signing without reading anything. I laughed while teasing Greg. That document was a deed of renunciation of the inheritance. By signing it, you ended up getting nothing. What? That's too harsh. At that time, Dad did tell you to check the contents carefully, but you just assumed it was about receiving $5 million and signed without verifying. Hearing this, Greg was shocked and lost color in his face. Next to him, Kate was causing a commotion. I quit my job thinking I was going to receive $5 million, and I've already spent all my savings. Greg is an important son to his mother, so Yoey will at least give us $100,000.
Right.
Kate also desperately sought help from my mother. I'm sorry, but that's impossible. I can't give a single penny to people who only see money. The $1,000 was his last act of kindness. Use it wisely. With that, my mother, holding back tears, left the scene. What are we going to do now, Greg? As Kate started making a fuss again, Greg just stood there, dazed. Look, give me half of your $500,000. There's no way I can do that. You've always belittled our family. You've even taken daily necessities and food from Mom. I'm done dealing with you. Normally quiet, I exploded with anger and shouted loudly. Now, if you understand, leave immediately. And never come back to this house. Unable to argue, the astonished brother and sister-in-law were driven out of the house, and I firmly locked the front door, feeling a definitive sense of closure. As a result, following the will, my brother and sister-in-law were left with only $1,000. Greg, having quit his job, lost his income to support the household, struggled to make even the small mortgage payments, and eventually they lost their home and had to move. Despite several visits to our family home, my once angry mother never forgave their actions. Local rumors suggest that they sought financial help from their daughter, but she, knowing all the details from my daughter, denied their requests and turned them away. As a result, my brother and sister-in-law, now discredited by everyone, live in a small apartment with a rent of $300 per month, barely getting by with day labor. A friend of Robert reported seeing them at the market looking terribly emaciated, pale as if the life had been drained from them, much like a spent candle. On the other hand, I used the inheritance from my father to carry out a major renovation of the aging family home several years ago, starting a new life with my mother. We redesigned every room to be barrier-free to ensure that my elderly mother could live without any difficulties, creating a safe and comfortable environment. And most surprisingly and joyfully, my daughter gave birth to a healthy baby boy, my first grandchild. My mother was overjoyed to see her great-grandchild, and recently, we have found great joy in playing with my grandson in the park. After years of hoping, a peaceful and calm life has finally become a reality. From now on, I sincerely hope to spend relaxed and fulfilling days with my precious family and friends. Just wait a moment.